Welcome to Enlivened Earth Activism, my reflections and an exploration on how the more than human world and our inner nature, our inner emotional lives, are a guidepost towards finding our true calling and our responsibilities in facing the challenges of the world. Welcome to a new podcast about activism, the deeper ecology of the world, and how spirituality and life systems are intertwined in a way that creates the beauty around us and a reconnection to our true nature, which is in depth a interplay between outer inner nature and becoming aware of our heart space, of our embeddedness in the web of life. So I'm just going to draw on a decade of activism that I have been involved in Norway and all over Europe. Something that started very early on with my bringing up in the United States, where I spent much of my summer time and also winter time deeply engaged in the more than human world in nature. We would have the chance to always go travel a lot. I was a very small child then, and my whole upbringing was based around this deep connection with the national parks and in general ecology and nature documentaries in many ways on the TV and in books and literature that I was able to read during that time. So from early on I had a very deep and vivid, mysterious relationship with nature, something that would continue to flourish throughout the ups and downs, the challenges and the good times in my life. As I stated, I'm now in Norway, where I've been for most part of my last 16, 17 years. My background is in organizational leadership and emotional intelligence in teams and organization-wide development of empathy and collaboration skills that are not so widely in practice yet. And combining that, I've had 10 years of direct action activism, where I've taken action on behalf of the earth, which is a journey that has taken me to some of the biggest, largest oil monstrosities in the North Sea and to occupying nuclear reactors in Northern Europe and partaking in mass mobilized actions throughout Europe. I've also been a initiator and co-facilitator of some international movements such as Extinction Rebellion and smaller grassroots movement throughout the years. The call to take action on behalf of nature, I think that's a good place to start. When that first spark of inspiration really hit me was a small moment of looking up, very fittingly to combine with the movie Don't Look Up. I had spent 5 years in a very disconnected state from nature, both inner and outer nature. And I was living in the city of Oslo. And during this time I was quite well paid, and everything was running very smoothly in the way that a Barbie and Ken story would be playing out, or a Paradise Hotel illusion fantasy would be something that I could identify with. During that time I was very involved in getting back and forth to work. So that was my main point of travel. But one day I decided to look up, and around Oslo there is this great wide forest that surrounds almost all the city, just not the places where the city meets the ocean. So by looking up, I noticed that I had not been in the forest for quite some time. And we're talking here about a forest that really stretches over the hills around the city of Oslo. So it's nestled in this surrounding wildness. But it's easy to forget that this wildness, or this more than human world, is present. So and it's often covered by the big buildings, the bustling life in the streets, and the activities and the possibilities to buy and consume and distract oneself from the wider world or the borders beyond the city. So one day I decided to instinctively look up and to really realize and connect with that part of me that was missing through my time in my business career. I looked up and I saw the trees overreaching the city, and I chose not to look away. So that would be the beginning of a journey where I pulled nature more towards me, and I was pulled more into nature. I quit my job and quit my career at that time, and everything kind of was already coming to an ending naturally, and I decided to give up the comforts of a home and move into a tent, where I would mostly be spending my time on and off in the city and in the forests, trying to step by step connect more with the deeper roots, the deeper nature of myself and the forest that surrounded the city. So this took me on a journey into activism, where when I first started realizing what was happening to our world, instinctively there came this push and pull to act, and to act for halting the damage that I was perceiving in the world. So this could be very I was still young in my activism years then, so I didn't really think too much about the underlying currents that were guiding me into that direction. But if I look back now, the feeling to take action and to become a nonviolent direct activist rose with a opening of my heart and a deep caring for the world, still covered by illusions of being a savior and being the one that's going to take care of all the problems by myself. But in its core, there was this deep yearning to really start to heal the world, something that was awakened in my inner cellular structure, something that brought with it something that is embedded in our DNA, a feeling of collaboration, participation in life, an urge to make possible more life. So when we look at the world today and we see how life just wants to live and how life feverishly eats up, actually consumes entropy in an attempt to create more life, and heavily resists standing still and entropy, some of those deeper forces, by looking just a couple of centimeters or millimeters up towards the forest, some of these wild elements inside of me became awakened and started to pull me into a direction that would forever change the course and outlook of my life. And I'm going to say that it's not just been, of course, pleasant experiences. There has been wondrous, great coming together of activists, friends, people, and helpers of many sorts when I decided to halfway consciously go onto this path of starting to heal the planet. A pathway that would bring with it the support of much of the world around me, and really start to shape my own experience of who I am and how I would like to contribute to society and how I would like to contribute to life. And it's very much a journey going into the not knowing and trusting. It's very much a journey of also positive disintegration and letting go of former inner and outer structures that until that point would have given me a certain form of support, but there still would be this feeling of lacking purpose or then emptiness that just could not be satisfied by the standards and the job and the way I was living before taking that deeper look into nature. So continuing on that journey, I've experienced great amounts of the pain of the world. That was one of the steps that I took consciously further down the line in my activism, in really opening not just to a small mental application of the perceived dangers to our world and life, but starting to also embody that experience fully by awakening my emotional potential, capacity to feel, and also my bodily experience. So from that point, my body is my closest connection to the world around me and nature, and developing the inner body capacity to feel more and to really not just solve problems head on as mainstream activism always does, but by allowing myself to be engaged and be engaged with a deeper awareness, body awareness, is kind of a long step that many have to take to really feel what it means to be connected and part of our planet. Let me just rewind that a little bit. So, first steps of activism for me were, of course, as I said, the head-on point of trying to save the world through an image, an idea that was supplied by an emotional world that I was very much, even though I had worked with emotions and self-feeling and that part in my organizational profession, becoming aware of the depth and the range of emotions and how they interconnect us to our living ancestors, our relatives of the more than human world, the trees, the rocks, the rivers, the streams, the ocean, and all the living beings around us, how our emotions are so deeply intertwined with this broader perspective ourselves. That was something I would have to start to delve into and understand deeper when going and taking action on behalf of our planet. So what I've realized throughout this journey is that, again, our emotions are deeply intertwined with everything around us. It's our communication channel in a sense. When I feel anger or sadness at the cutting down or the felling of a tree, that is something that deeply resonates within me. Or I might be numb, or I might not be feeling, but that I'm seeing something happening in our world, and it awakens in me a capacity to feel compassion for that other being that is not me, that is not part of the human family that I'm normally surrounded with, but is part of my wider, broader, living biological family. That opening up to seeing step by step and responsibly what is happening to our world allowed me to create a much more embedded and felt experience of the activism I was doing before. So getting to know the wider relatives that we have around us, it also reflects on how we are currently experiencing the degradation and the destruction of our environment. So these emotions and bodily sensations, and many of us have been picking up on more and more of the chaotic nature and the uncertainty of our times. When we start to look at nature as not separate, and we start to feel into what it actually means to be an Earth citizen, we can start to uncover by going into action and taking action for our world, for life. We start to meet layers of ourselves that might have been frozen and dormant for generations, or for most part of our lives, or even thousands of years. So there's the anger, the fear, the terror, the dread, a very personal experience that comes with experiencing a loss of biodiversity and the destruction of our habitat. So I always remind myself of, when I'm feeling these feelings, it's a welcome inclusion and a welcome addition to my already heavy experience of being on this planet. It's not that I've found something new within myself, or that something has arisen. I heard a podcast lately and said that the destruction of nature is, of course, a result of our current emotional vibration. That's close, but no cigar. I would say that our current crisis is nature is showing us our interconnectedness, and we are slowly starting to wake up to that interplay of emotion, sensation, and interconnection. And that is a hurtful process. It is a process that we are thawing up. There's been an intelligence involved, and there is a reason for us not wanting to feel or not having the capacity to feel this interconnectedness with nature. If that's trauma, intergenerational trauma, for some it's the theory that for 10, 12,000 years ago, the temperature of the earth shifted quite rapidly into a cold period, which started the agricultural revolution, which started the process of ownership and not having enough and wanting more of privatized resources. So this cold period that scared and traumatized people somehow set into motion freezing and not feeling, and also set into motion the story of separation, people separated from each other, but also people and humans separated from nature, separated from an interconnected living together. It also set into motion, of course, this fear of uncertainty, a fear of wanting to know what tomorrow, a fear that leads to wanting to know what tomorrow looks like, and staying safe and holding up defenses and building walls to create a unrealistic feeling of security. So through much of our human journey, that has been a defining development where we've kind of started, and it's not that we're making things worse at the moment, it's actually that we are waking up for the first time from 1,000-year, if not million-year sleep, and once again reconnecting to our wider relatives. We're waking up and we're awakening in these trauma structures which have been kind of holding us in the story of separation for so long. And we're discovering our possibility to feel with our planet, to feel much more than we originally had allowed us to do. So when it comes to the climate and ecological crisis, we're looking at it's a spiritual, it's a soulful, it's a turning around, turning inside out. Nature's knocking at our door and once again offering us the gift of uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, in the wildness that is nature, we are invited to once again start to take a hot bath in our bodies and emotions and start to release the tensions that have for so long been holding the feelings of not feeling in place. Because the choice to not feel and the choice to be separate from the world or to be separate from each other is a huge source of energy consumption. To hold trauma in place or to choose to block oneself off from the world is a huge it has a huge toll of energy on it. We can see that in the way that the Western society, especially the richest nations, are still choosing to go and dive for more oil to create a false sense of security in a heavily challenged and burning planet. We see that in the way that we like to fight wars in other places very far from home. All of these ways of transportation, safe transportation, and ways of bringing into our lives more entertainment and possibilities to buy more security. Again, it's an illusion of security. in a way we're spending huge amounts of money and materials and energy on keeping that feeling of uncertainty away from us. And in that sense, we are actually inviting that sense of insecurity, uncertainty, more and more into our lives. And it's going to be, the more we kind of try to push it away, the more we build up a charge, which in the end is going to really hit us harder. So we're looking in these times at really coming to a realism of what we are doing to our more than human world. And nature has been reminding us all the time and saying, hey, I'm here. You can come and dance with my uncertainty and my wildness. But now that we've tried to look away and spending and making sure that we're safe, we're still not being able to escape the wildness, the uncertainty, the beauty of life. Because whatever scares us in life, by allowing us to really feel and participate in that emotional dance, the more beautiful life also becomes. By allowing us to see the horrors and opening up to the destruction of our world, we also find more capacity for gratitude, for happiness, for joy, and we start to dance more in this beautiful dance that is the world. So, coming from a society that is spending lots of energy to entertain, to distract, to disassociate from the world, we are invited to participate, to become whole, and to fully also embody those feelings and emotions that we do not want to feel. Everything, of course, responsibly, and it's an invitation to not go head into the climate crisis, because there's going to be a long tail of emotional and physical experiences that will need to be sorted out when running head first into the ecological emergency. It's great for some, but for others, just taking the time each day to slowly start to allow space to see what's happening in our world, to allow the space for that to integrate and to be felt, and to also let that be a driving force towards taking action, but everyone in their own pace and step by step. It seems that we don't have much time, but there's our nervous systems, they can only take so much, and every journey here is very individual. So it's a part of thawing us up into a interconnected web of life, where we are starting to begin to see the relationships between everything. Instead of seeing nature as separate, we are seeing that there is an interplay between everything, and that everything helps in regulating our temperatures, our waters, the acidity of the oceans. Even the elk and the wolves help regulate the climate by multiplying and becoming, by creating larger numbers, and by moving further north or further south. And that interplay is also guided by the trees and the tree line. So this interplay that we can see and that we're starting to see in all beings on the planet, we can start to see this deep belonging and play that contributes to the security of all the living beings on the planet. So we're waking up to that dance right now, and it's an amazing time to be alive. Things are happening very fast, and things are organizing and changing very quickly. No one can say how things are going to go, if it's going to go to hell, or if we're going to survive this this transition, or if we're going to hold on to the ways of old. But things are happening quickly. We're seeing, when we take time and really look into what is it that I want to do to help contribute to this shift into a more sustainable, more caring world. We can also take a look around us. We also have to take a moment to breathe and make space to reorient us, because taking action and actually doing something for the world, that goes very closely with it goes hand in hand with taking in the pain of the world, so that one is informed by what's happening in our world to the degree that one is capable of, and then taking action also to also participate informed and responsibly in the healing of our world. And sometimes people say that, yeah, but I can't be an activist. I would agree with what Joanna Macy says, that everyone who decides to do something for the greater good and for some more than themselves is an activist. And we can look at our times and the times that we're living in and take a breather, and we actually notice that there is the biggest social movement that has ever existed on the planet, that is organically and creatively forming in this time. And that means there is a huge movement, as written by Paul Hawken in his book Blessed Unrest, a huge movement that is divided into three fingers, or three directions, and that's standing up for ecological rights, or the ecological movement is one big finger of that. Then we have the preservation and the defense and the standing up for the rights of indigenous communities, indigenous people, indigenous lands. And then we have the whole social movement, standing up for social rights. So these are like three branches that are more and more conversing in our time. And Paul Hawken, he did a survey on how many organizations there were worldwide that were involved in this struggle for justice, peace, and indigenous rights, ecological preservation. And I think the number is probably up about 3.5 million organizations worldwide now. And so we're witnessing a huge social movement, which of course is not visualized in the mainstream media. The revolution will not be televised, but in a way, yes, as well. It's there's a lot happening when one takes a moment to not just feel into the pain of the world, but also takes a moment to feel the gratitude and the happiness and the joy of being part of the world. And that is an essential part. We all have to find our ecological niche, our joy for the world, something that we personally, our personal story that we want to embody, and how we want to contribute to a healing of that rift between human and nature, and humans and each other. So there is a good guidance in that, and something that brings one joy, something that really enlivens one's life. That is a good pointer towards what one can contribute to in creating a more life-sustaining and just world. So following your bliss is something Joseph Campbell said, and that is accounted for as well. So I think by being a responsible citizen in the world that we live in, we open ourselves responsibly to the pain of the world, not just head on and just reading the news, but actually making space to really feel the immensity of what the earth is feeling, and starting to open up that window step by step. And at the same time, remembering to feel into the gratitude and that joy about what one already has with oneself in these times, the tools. It might be a house, it might be a car, it might be the coffee cup in the morning, it might be the joy of reading a book, or the smile on your children's faces when they wake up and see you. So remembering to include the joy and the pain in the world in equal measures and responsibly, and let that kind of be a guidepost to more and more, again, dancing that life between consciously adding gratitude and consciously and with awareness shining a light on the hardships of this world, or the hardships of life. That's a good starting point to really dance in life and feeling more connection to life and coming back to life. So that was a bit about my journey and how that whole thing started. It started with just looking up a couple of centimeters into the treetops towering above Oslo city, to staying with that vision, and how that vision leads to a life of adventure and movement, self-discovery as a part of this living, breathing planet, and starting to realize the larger body, where I'm not just alone, but I am, as in systems theory, in a whirlwind or a maelstrom or a node in a neural net that consists of innumerable species and wildness, and I'm coming back online in this network responsibly, step by step, to feel the emotions, to take in the connections to my larger body, my world heart. That's slowly melting that little node back into being and becoming of service to something larger than myself, which also is myself. There is an Indian saying, when there is a lot of thoughts in the mind, then those thoughts are just like the wind that it's blowing all around. And I like to remind myself that when times are tough and there's a lot of thoughts going on, those thoughts are not really separated from the world around me. They are very much intertwined. And I coming from the wind also flows into me through my breath. By breathing in, I breathe in the world, and by breathing out, I offer myself to the world. It's this deep connection, and if anyone comes to me and asks me if or just points out that they're not really connected to this world and they're going somewhere else, or they don't belong to this world, then I try to point out the breath and how that, by holding your breath and trying to hold your breath for more than 3 minutes, or as long as you can, at some point you will realize that you are an interbreathing being with this planet, and that includes the good, the bad, and that's not really any good or bad, but the pain of the world is that it's becoming more heavy, and the emotional cake that you might be feeling is growing and growing in these times. I would say don't feel discouraged by that, but really honor that as a part of the world, a part of yourself, because as with a wound, that a cut on the hand, if the body doesn't really feel where that wound is, or doesn't communicate to each other, more importantly, like if all our cells in the body don't communicate that there is a wound in our hand, then we would have a really hard time healing that wound. So by opening up to the possibility of listening more deeply to our world and the pain, and by not labeling it as good, bad, but to slowly uncovering that onion, and really being able to be with our own pain, our pain for the world, the anger, the grief, the sorrow, the sadness, the emptiness, the not feeling, by slowly chiseling away at that rock of fear, we allow us to become informed, into becoming moved again, into awakening into a larger story, a story of reconnection and healing, and participation in life, and just noticing that life is knocking on our door every day and inviting us to join that dance. And life wants to live. We can join that dance of living even more brilliantly. Then now is a perfect time to start doing that. It's the report Limits to Growth, according to that, was written in the 70s, if I remember correctly. We're right now at the top of the Western civilization, and the French president just recently stated that we've come to the end of affluence or consumption, and I would say that we are right now on a doorstep, on a threshold, where I think the affluence, or the joy of living, where we're really starting to, for the first time, be nudged. We're all collectively being nudged outside of the door, our shire, into an adventure of our lives, where we will find friends, we'll face monsters, we'll travel to faraway lands, if those are inner lands or outer lands, or just wider rings of community. We're being nudged into this adventure where we have to redefine what is good, what is bad, what is comfort, what is safety, and what are we going to relinquish and let go of on this journey, and how are we going to move forward? How are we going to trust our will? Are we going to trust life? Or are we going to listen to and heed the call of adventure? Are we going to bury down behind some new VR glasses, and close our doors and lock ourselves out of life even harder? Or are we going to listen to and make space for all those things that we collectively have not been feeling for the last many thousand years, are we going to embrace our sacred wound that we all personally carry? Are we going to responsibly open to our wider story? So the choice here is really up to us, and it starts, I think, with the breath. It starts to listening to those inner impulses, and by being responsible, able to respond to the world more and more, we're going to take those steps that are needed. Just gonna end on a quote here from Joanna Macy, and that is, let me see if I can find that. That one was, we're not going to save the world. I'm just going to freely recite this. I don't know if this is exactly what the quote was, but we're not going to save our world, but we can learn to love our world, and that means also loving our sacred wound, our experiences of the past, knowing them to be in a deeper context, that even though the hardships that we might have faced in our life, they all are also connected to a larger story of our ancestors, the struggles that they've been going through, the struggles that our ancestors had to face, the oppression, slavery, torture, the being forced to work in mines and factory buildings as children, and wars and so on. We still are seeing the after effects of that in our society, and the traumatization of that, but seeing the hardships that we personally have faced as part of that bigger story, the larger story of disconnect that has been rummaging through human civilization. And again, I'm going to repeat that we're not on the way of making things worse. It's actually, we're clearing and we're coming out of those, we've been processing through those experiences for quite some time now. So we are actually on the way to a more life-sustaining world rapidly. But seeing both our personal pains and our personal wounds as something that is part of a larger story, that is part of a larger disconnect from nature. So we're not going to save the world, but we can learn to love the world, love the good, the bad, love the tough experiences more. And by doing so, we allow the next healing steps to happen through us. So this was one episode telling a bit about my background story and my current experience as a awakening node on planet Earth. I'm going to share some more of these stories in the future to go a little bit deeper into what I'm feeling and experiencing in this time on the top of society's development. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll stay tuned for more